Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously terrifying true story that came to us from a subscriber named Aditi. And trust me, it's one of the most chilling cautionary tales you'll ever hear about what can be lurking inside the walls of a new home. Yeah, you heard that right. That's a direct quote from Aditi, and it is the horrifying peak of her story. So you gotta ask yourself, how does a young woman, totally happy and in love, get pushed to a point that is just unimaginable? Well, it all started with what seemed like the perfect apartment and a pretty big warning she decided to brush aside.
So let's paint a picture here. We've got Aditi and Mahesh, a young couple in Mumbai. They'd reconnected as adults, fallen hard for each other, and were ready to, start their lives together. Finding their own place was the obvious next step.
So Aditi was on the hunt for an apartment, but here's their first big mistake. They never actually saw it together. Mahesh kept getting stuck at work, so they ended up just relying on pictures and a quick look-see from his cousins, who said it was great. But right as they were getting ready to move, Aditi's family gave her a crucial warning. So this warning, it was about Mahesh's mother. Aditi's family was convinced she was involved in black magic. They told her to be careful, reminding her that when you get married, you're joining two families, not just marrying one person. But Aditi was so in love, she just waved it all off. They moved in, and it took almost no time at all for the apartment's real dark nature to show itself. Okay, so the first couple of nights, totally fine. Deceptively calm, actually. But on the third day, Mahesh had to leave for a work trip. The moment Aditi was alone in that apartment, the terror kicked in, and it ramped up with terrifying speed. It started with that classic skin-crawling feeling of being watched. But then came the nightmares. We're talking vivid, messed up stuff. One night, she dreamed about a woman on a train, standing over a pentagram, eating a baby. She shot awake, and that's when she felt it, an invisible force pulling on her leg. And it didn't stop there. As the nights went on, it got more aggressive, with unseen hands literally lifting her arms and legs into the air while she slept. This slide just captures it perfectly. Mahesh's complete 180. At first, he totally blew off her fears, saying that it was all in her head. But then she told him that whatever was there was physically pulling her limbs away from him in bed. So he decided to stay up one night and watch. And he just watches in absolute horror as this invisible thing does exactly that. He shook Aditi awake, yelling, "Get up, someone is here." The skeptic was officially gone. So Mahesh is no longer a skeptic, not even close. He's terrified, and he agrees Aditi can't be left alone there. They call her grandmother, her nani, who was this deeply religious woman, to come stay with them for protection. The idea was that her faith would act as a shield. Instead, the entity's influence just got a whole lot stronger. The change in her nani was just horrifying. Within just 3 days of showing up, this deeply religious woman, she just stops praying. Cold. Her entire personality twisted. She became hostile, aggressive, starting these horrible, vicious fights with Aditi over absolutely nothing. The apartment became this pressure cooker of psychological torment, and it all boiled over during one final, explosive fight. And that was the breaking point. Pushed by this rage that felt like it was hers but also completely alien, she grabbed a lighter. As her nani just sat there watching, Aditi poured the fluid on her own clothes and set herself on fire. And here's the absolute coldest part. As Aditi is literally on fire, her nani just sits there, chanting, "Die, die, die." Okay, so Aditi somehow survives this, but she's in the hospital with terrible burns. Her parents are obviously horrified, and they're like, "We have to get to the bottom of this, now." They brought in a pandit, a Hindu priest, to investigate the apartment and figure out the source of the evil that was living there. So this was the million-dollar question, right? Was this the black magic from Mahesh's mom? A random ghost? What was going on? Well, the pundit walked into the building, and the second he walks in, he feels it. This huge, dark energy. And it's not just in their apartment, it's in the bones of the building itself. And what the pundit reveals is just chilling. The evil wasn't just visiting their home, it was their home. The entire high-rise building was constructed right on top of a cemetery. It was haunted by several spirits, a pregnant woman who'd been murdered and 2 men who died in an accident. His advice? It was blunt and it was terrifying. This place can't be fixed. You have to get out. Not just the apartment, the whole area. But, just packing up and leaving? It's never that easy, is it? They were stuck financially. They couldn't afford to just walk away from their security deposit and the rent they'd paid, so they were forced to stay and endure even more terror. Nightmares of being assaulted. And, they started seeing figures standing outside their window, on a high-rise floor where nobody could possibly be standing. Just, no. The absolute final straw, the thing that broke the camel's back, happened when Aditi's parents were visiting. For no medical reason at all, her burn wounds, which had been healing, suddenly just burst open. Seeing something so unnatural was all it took. They basically told Mahesh, forget the money, get her out of here, now. So they fled, losing all their cash, but saving their lives. And get this, a neighbor later told them her own husband had died a few years earlier from some mysterious illness in that same building. Look, Aditi's story it's a nightmare, but it serves as a massive warning for any of us moving into a new place. The lessons are crystal clear. First off, you have to investigate a property's history. Second, talk to the people who live there. Her neighbor even said if they just asked, she would have warned them. Third, don't skip the spiritual cleansing rituals, whatever your faith is. And maybe the most important lesson of all, trust your gut. If a place feels wrong, just get out. So I'll just leave you with this one thought. We build our lives, our homes, on these little plots of land, but we hardly ever stop to ask what stories that ground held long before we ever showed up. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.